Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Welcome to Horror Night Whispers. Tonight, we descend into the final documented moments of a man whose last shift became his eternal vigil. In the archives of small-town terror, few cases disturb with such clinical precision as this one. A groundskeeper's routine patrol that unraveled into something the living mind recoils from comprehending. The evidence we present tonight has been reconstructed from security logs, body camera footage, radio transmissions, and employment records that contradict the very possibility of their own existence. What you're about to hear isn't folklore whispered around campfires. It's documented fact, cold, verifiable, and utterly impossible. The cemetery keeps its secrets in the earth, but sometimes those secrets walk the perimeter with borrowed faces and stolen voices. Stay with us as we examine the case file of Marcus Chen, whose final round through Oakwood Cemetery revealed something waiting in Section K. Something that had been studying him far longer than he'd been watching the grounds. Listen carefully. October 14th began like any other closing shift at Oakwood Cemetery. Marcus Chen clocked in at 6:47 p.m. under a sky already surrendering to early autumn darkness, the kind that settles heavy and complete across southern Ohio by mid-October. The temperature held at 48 degrees, unseasonably cold, with humidity thick enough to blur the edges of distant monuments into suggestions of themselves. Chen had worked groundskeeping at Oakwood for 7 months, long enough to know every pathway, every sunken grave marker, every tree that dropped branches across the maintenance roads, long enough to develop the efficient rhythm of a man who understood his territory. His shift log, recovered later from the main office, documents a methodical approach. Check the front gates, inspect the chapel locks, walk the perimeter fence line, secure the maintenance shed, complete a final sweep through the oldest sections before locking up at 10:30 p.m. Standard procedure. The last routine evening of his life. He began his rounds as the last visitors departed, their headlights cutting brief channels through the gathering fog that rolled in from Stillwater Creek bordering the eastern property line. Oakwood sprawled across 43 acres of gently sloping terrain, with burial sections dating back to 1847. Arranged in a rough chronological expansion from the original plot, Section K outward, toward the newer areas near the main entrance. Chen's boots crunched on gravel paths, still damp from morning rain as he moved through the modern sections first, his flashlight beam sweeping across polished granite and fresh flower arrangements. The security system showed him passing. Camera 3 at 7:12 p.m., Camera 7 at 7:31 p.m., Camera 12 at 7:54 p.m., all functioning normally, all recording a solitary figure in a dark blue groundskeeper's jacket, moving with practiced efficiency through the deepening night. By 8:30 p.m., Chen had completed the fence inspection and was making his way towards Section K, the oldest burial ground tucked against the northwestern corner where the property bordered dense woods. The fog had thickened considerably, reducing visibility to perhaps 30 feet. Transforming the cemetery into a series of isolated pockets of visibility surrounded by blank, gray nothing. His shift log notes, heavy fog, limited sight lines, temperature dropping. The security footage from Camera 14, positioned to overlook the transition area between Section J and Section K, shows him pausing at 8:47 p.m., turning his head as though he'd heard something. Then continuing forward into the older section, where the headstones leaned at weathered angles, and the family crypts stood like small houses for the permanent dead. Section K held 217 graves, most dating from the 1,840 through the 1,880, with a handful of family plots that continued accepting burials into the early 20th century. The Hartwell Mausoleum dominated the central area, a granite structure built in 1873, elaborate for its time, with iron gates and stone angels, whose features had eroded into blank suggestions beneath a century and a half of Ohio weather. Chen's route took him past the Hartwell crypt on every closing shift. He'd photographed it once for the maintenance log after noticing cracks in the foundation. It was just architecture. just stone. At 9:23 p.m., Chen's shift log includes a single line. Heard something in K, probably animal. The security feed from camera 16, the final camera with a partial view of section K's eastern edge, shows him standing motionless for 43 seconds, head cocked, before moving deeper into the section. The footage quality deteriorates in the fog, reducing Chen to a moving shadow among stationary ones. What the cameras don't capture, what only his handwritten report later revealed, was the sound of his own voice calling his name from somewhere deeper in section K, between the rows of leaning headstones where the mist lay thickest. Marcus. He wrote that he heard it clearly, a perfect reproduction of his own voice. The slight nasal quality he'd always hated in recordings, the exact pitch and cadence. It came from the direction of the Hartwell Mausoleum. Chen stood listening to the fog-muffled silence that followed, weighing the possibility of teenagers, of some prank, of equipment malfunction from the scattered audio speakers used during funeral services. But the speakers had been disconnected for the season, and the voice had come from deep in section K, where no one should have been. Where he was certain no one had entered. He continued his patrol, flashlight beam cutting narrow paths through the gray, boots squelching on grass grown long between the old graves. The temperature had dropped further. He could see his breath. At 9:47 p.m., every security camera in Oakwood Cemetery cut to static simultaneously. All 16 feeds dissolved into electronic snow, without warning, without explanation. The security company's diagnostic report, filed 3 days later, found no technical cause for the failure. The system simply stopped recording for exactly 11 minutes. What happened during those 11 minutes exists only in Marcus Chen's written report and the footage recovered from his personal body camera, a device he'd purchased himself after a summer incident with vandals. The body cam, found 70 yards from his final position, provides fragmented documentation of those missing minutes, shakily framed images, degraded audio, timestamps that jump and stutter as though the device itself was struggling to process what it recorded. The first clear image shows the Hartwell Mausoleum emerging from fog at 9:52 p.m. Its iron gates closed, stone angels standing guard with their eroded faces, and standing beside the crypt's entrance, motionless, a figure in period clothing, dark wool coat, high collar, clothing from another century rendered in perfect detail despite the fog. Chen's flashlight beam found the figure and held it. The body cam audio captures his breathing, the catch of surprise, then his voice. "Sir, we're closed. You need to leave the property." The figure didn't respond, didn't acknowledge him, simply stood there beside the mausoleum in clothing that belonged in archives, not on a living person in October 2023. Chen approached, gravel crunching under his boots, each step closing the distance between them. 20 feet, 15, 10, and the figure turned. Chen's body camera captured the moment in degraded color, the flashlight beam illuminating a face that made him stop walking, made him stop breathing for several seconds. The face was his own. Every detail perfect the slight asymmetry of his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fall, the exact shape of his mouth. The figure wearing the period clothing had Marcus Chen's face, and that face watched him with the blank attention of something studying its own reflection. The mouth moved, shaping words without sound, lips forming syllables Chen couldn't hear but somehow understood. The body cam audio captures his response. "What the fuck? What the..." Then he was running. The footage degrades into chaos, bouncing images of headstones and fog, and the narrow paths between burial plots, the flashlight beam jerking wildly across granite and grass. Chen's breathing fills the audio, harsh and panicked, interspersed with muttered words, "Not real, not real, not real." But beneath his breathing, beneath his voice, the body cam picks up something else. Footsteps matching his pace exactly, maintaining a constant distance behind him. Always there, always 20 feet back. The same rhythm, the same weight, the same crunch of gravel that should have been his alone. At 9:58 p.m., the footage shows Chen reaching the small stone chapel near Section G, its white walls emerging from fog like a promise of sanctuary. He stumbled up the 3 steps to the entrance, tried the door locked. He'd locked it himself an hour ago, then pressed his face against the narrow windows flanking the doorway. The body cam captures his reflection in the glass, the beam of his flashlight creating enough illumination to see himself clearly. And in that reflection, he saw himself standing perfectly still, not moving with him, not mirroring his panicked breathing or his desperate searching of the darkness behind him. The reflection stood motionless in the window, watching him with calm attention while the real Marcus Chen stared back in horror. "No," he said to his own still face. "No, no, no." He backed away from the chapel, the body cam footage showing his retreat down the steps, his wild scanning of the fog-dense cemetery around him. The footsteps had stopped. Everything had stopped. The silence pressed against the microphone like physical weight. Chen pulled his radio from his belt, hands shaking badly enough that he nearly dropped it, and keyed the transmit button. The dispatch recording, submitted as evidence, preserves his voice at 10:03 p.m. "This is Chen at Oakwood. I need police out here. There's something it knows my route. It's wearing my jacket, it has my face." The dispatcher's response crackles with professional calm, asking him to clarify, asking his location, asking if he needs medical assistance. But Chen wasn't listening anymore. The body cam shows him turning in a slow circle, flashlight beam cutting arcs through the fog, searching for something that had been 20 feet behind him and was now nowhere, or everywhere. His breathing filled the audio, rapid and shallow, the breathing of prey that knows it's been caught. At 10:11 p.m., Chen's final radio transmission reached dispatch. No words, this time, just breathing, harsh and wet, and beneath it, a sound the audio analysis team later described as organic tearing, possibly fabric, possibly tissue. The transmission lasted 14 seconds before cutting off. The body cam continued recording for another 90 seconds, but the footage shows only fog and darkness, and the beam of Chen's dropped flashlight illuminating a patch of grass and a headstone dated 1851. Then the device either died or was destroyed. The file corrupts into digital static and ends. The Oakwood Cemetery security system restored itself at 9:58 p.m. All 16 cameras resuming normal operations simultaneously, showing empty pathways and fog-shrouded sections, and no sign of Marcus Chen. Police arrived at 10:47 p.m., following the dispatcher's concerns. They found the cemetery locked, the gates secured, everything in its proper place except for the groundskeeper. They searched with flashlights and radios, calling his name into the fog, walking the same routes he'd walked hours before. At 6:14 a.m., as dawn light finally penetrated the mist, Officer Sarah Mitchell found him sitting against the Hartwell Mausoleum's stone wall, back pressed to the granite, legs straight out before him, hands resting palms up on the grass. His eyes were open. He was breathing. But when Mitchell approached, when she called his name and touched his shoulder, Marcus Chen didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge her presence in any way. His eyes remained fixed on something in the middle distance, focused on a point between the headstones where the morning light couldn't quite penetrate the lingering shadows. Mitchell followed his gaze but saw nothing, just graves, just fog beginning to burn off in the early sun, just Section K, where the oldest dead waited in their weathered plots. She called for an ambulance. Chen didn't resist when the paramedics lifted him onto the stretcher, didn't fight when they loaded him into the ambulance. He simply continued staring at that fixed point, his mouth moving occasionally in shapes that might have been words or might have been nothing at all. 3 days later, during the investigation into Chen's breakdown, Detective James Kowalski requested the cemetery's employment records as part of standard procedure. The file arrived by email from the administrative office, complete and properly formatted, showing Marcus Chen's hiring date as March 3, 2023. His home address, his emergency contact information, his direct deposit details, everything routine, everything normal, except for the attached notation at the bottom of the file, a piece of information that had somehow been missed during the hiring process, during the background check, during 7 months of employment. Marcus Chen, social security number matching, date of birth matching, had been killed in a single vehicle accident on September 8, 2022. 6 months before Oakwood Cemetery hired him. 6 months before he'd ever walked the grounds, before he'd learned the routes, before he'd discovered what waited in Section K for someone wearing his face. The cemetery's HR department has no explanation for the discrepancy. The man who worked there was real, physical, documented. The man who died in September 2022 is equally documented, buried at Cedar Grove Memorial across town. But the employment records exist. The shift logs exist. 7 months of surveillance footage exists, showing Marcus Chen performing his duties, walking the paths, locking the gates. Marcus Chen is currently receiving care at Stillwater Psychiatric Facility, where he remains non-verbal and unresponsive. Sometimes staff report that he turns his head as though watching something move through the hallways. Sometimes his mouth shapes words no one can hear. And in Section K at Oakwood Cemetery, where the oldest dead keep their secrets beneath leaning headstones and eroded stone, the groundskeepers' final round continues in the fog that never fully lifts. Footsteps echoing against footsteps, a figure in a dark blue jacket walking the perimeter of something that has no end. The night deepens. Our second account emerges from the archives, another fragment of terror preserved in the records. Detective Linda Vasquez's case file, #2847, sits among the strangest investigations ever conducted in Riverside County. For 14 months, surveillance systems at Riverside Memorial Park recorded the same impossible visitation, night after night, with mechanical precision. An elderly woman in a black mourning veil appearing at grave 447B between the hours of 2 and 2:47 a.m. Every security guard who worked the night shift filed reports. Every attempt at direct contact failed. The woman would vanish mid-approach, only to reappear at the graveside moments later, as if she'd never moved. The footage accumulated. The reports multiplied. And on March 3rd, groundskeeper Robert Hayes made the decision to end the mystery himself. His body cam recorded what happened when someone finally refused to look away. Riverside Memorial Park stretches across 42 acres of manicured lawn and weathered headstones on the eastern edge of the city, where the streetlights end and the darkness of the valley begins. During the day, it's a place of quiet reflection, orderly rows of granite markers, oak trees providing shade, families bringing flowers to their dead. At night, it transforms. The trees become silhouettes against the sodium glow from the distant highway. Fog rolls in from the river basin, settling between the graves like something looking for a place to rest. The paths that seem welcoming in sunlight become corridors of shadow after dark. Security guard Thomas Mercer filed the first report on January 18th. He'd been making his rounds through the southern section at 2:15 a.m. when he noticed a figure kneeling at a grave near the old fountain. A woman in dark clothing, completely still. He approached to inform her that the cemetery closed at sunset, his flashlight beam cutting through the mist. When he was 20 feet away, the woman simply wasn't there anymore. His light swept the empty grass where she'd been kneeling. He circled the headstone, checked behind the nearby monuments. Nothing. He reported it in his log as a possible intruder who fled, though he couldn't explain how she disappeared so quickly or so completely. The next night, she was there again. Same grave, same position, same black veil covering her head and shoulders. Mercer called for backup this time. Officer Sarah Chen arrived within minutes. Together, they approached from different angles, flashlights trained on the kneeling figure. When Chen was 15 feet away, the woman vanished. Not quickly, instantaneously. One moment present, the next moment gone, as if someone had cut her from the frame of reality. But when they retreated to their vehicles and checked the surveillance feed, the woman was back at the grave, kneeling, motionless. The timestamp showed she'd never left. Detective Linda Vasquez inherited the case after the 5th incident report. She reviewed the surveillance footage personally, frame by frame. The cameras showed the woman arriving at exactly 2 a.m. each night. She would appear at the edge of frame, walking slowly along the path that led to section 400. Her movements smooth and unhurried. At grave 447B, She would kneel on the grass, produce a bouquet of white roses from somewhere within her dark clothing, and place them gently at the base of the headstone. Then she would remain absolutely motionless for precisely 47 minutes. At 2:47 a.m., she would stand, bow her head once, and walk back the way she'd come, disappearing from frame. The routine never varied, not by a single minute, not by a single movement. Vasquez ordered higher resolution cameras installed around grave 447B. She wanted facial details, clothing specifics, anything that might identify the woman. The new footage showed more, but explained nothing. The woman wore a dress that looked decades old, the kind of formal mourning attire from another era. Her veil was thick black lace, obscuring her face completely. Her hands, visible when she placed the roses, appeared elderly, pale skin marked with age spots, fingers thin and delicate. But when guards approached her directly, the same phenomenon occurred. She would vanish, and the cameras would show her reappearing at the grave within seconds, as if nothing had interrupted her vigil. The headstone itself offered few clues. Evelyn Marsh, 1,924 to 1,998. No other inscription. No beloved wife. No loving mother. Just a name and dates carved into granite. Cemetery records showed the plot had been purchased in 1997 by Evelyn Marsh herself. She'd been buried there following her death from natural causes at age 74. No family attended the funeral. No one had visited the grave in the years since, until the night visitations began, 27 years after her burial. Vasquez interviewed the security staff individually. Each guard described the same experience. The woman seemed solid, real, physical. She cast shadows. She disturbed the dew on the grass when she walked, but she couldn't be touched, couldn't be reached. Junior guard Marcus Webb tried standing directly between her and the grave one night. He watched her approach along the path, her dark form moving steadily through the mist. He planted himself in front of the headstone, determined to make contact. The woman kept walking. Webb held his ground. When she was 5 feet away, he called out to her. She didn't acknowledge him. She kept coming. Webb stepped forward, arm extended to stop her. His hand passed through empty air. The woman was suddenly behind him, already kneeling at the grave, roses in hand. Webb's flashlight shook so badly he could barely hold it. He requested a transfer the following week. By February, the cemetery's night operations had effectively ceased in Section 400. Guards would patrol the perimeter, but avoided the area between 2 and 3 a.m. Maintenance crews refused to work in that section after dark. Vasquez considered closing the investigation. No crime was being committed, no property was being damaged, no one was being harmed. But the surveillance footage kept accumulating, night after night, a growing archive of the impossible. And then groundskeeper Robert Hayes volunteered to end it. Hayes had worked at Riverside Memorial for 16 years. He'd maintained the grounds through every season, knew every corner of the property, had never believed in anything he couldn't dig up or cut down. The stories about the mourning woman struck him as mass hysteria. Security guards spooked by their own shadows and grainy video feeds. He told Vasquez he'd prove it. He'd wait at the grave before the woman arrived, catch her in the act of whatever trick she was performing. Vasquez approved the plan with one condition. Hayes would wear a body cam. Everything would be recorded. March 3rd arrived cold and clear. Hayes positioned himself at grave 447B at 1:30 a.m., giving himself time to acclimate, time to watch and wait. The bodycam footage shows his perspective standing beside Evelyn Marsh's headstone, the cemetery spreading out around him in shades of gray and black. His breathing is audible in the recording, steady at first. The fountain in the distance provides ambient sound, water trickling over stone. Fog drifts through the graves, thick enough to blur the background. Hayes shifts his weight occasionally, checks his watch. 1:45 a.m., 1:52 a.m. His breath plumes in the cold air. At 1:58 a.m., the temperature drops. Hayes notices it immediately. His breath becomes thicker, more visible. Frost begins forming on the grass around the grave, spreading outward in delicate patterns. The body cam's audio picks up his breathing changing rhythm, becoming faster, shallower. He doesn't move. The fountain sound seems more distant now, as if the world has receded, leaving only this grave, this moment, this cold. At exactly 2 a.m., the ground in front of the headstone begins to darken, not with shadow, with wetness. The soil looks suddenly saturated, as if water is seeping up from below. Hayes takes a small step back. The wet patch spreads, roughly the size of a human body. And then the earth begins to move, not breaking apart, not scattering, simply moving aside, rippling like water, like cloth, like something that was never solid to begin with. The woman rises from the ground, not climbing, not emerging, rising. Her form materializes from the disturbed earth like smoke taking shape, translucent at first, then gradually solidifying. The black veil comes into focus, the dark dress, the pale hands. She rises until she's kneeling on the grass that moments ago had opened for her, and she becomes fully present, fully solid. The wet patch is gone. The ground is undisturbed. Only the woman remains, kneeling before the headstone, white roses held in her delicate fingers. Hayes stands completely frozen. The body cam shows his view tilting slightly as his head lowers, watching her place the roses at the base of the grave. Her movements are slow, reverent. The flowers settle against the granite with a soft sound. The woman's hands withdraw, folding into her lap. She becomes motionless, her veiled head bowed. Hayes's breathing fills the audio, rapid, panicked, fighting for control. 40 seconds pass. The woman doesn't move. Hayes doesn't move. The cemetery is absolutely silent except for his breathing and the distant fountain. Then, the woman's head begins to turn, not tilting, turning, rotating on her neck with a smooth, continuous motion that doesn't stop at natural limits. Her shoulders remain perfectly still, facing the headstone. But her head keeps turning 90 degrees, 120 degrees, 150 degrees, until she's facing directly backward, facing Hayes, her veiled face now pointed at him, though her body hasn't shifted at all. The veil doesn't hide her anymore. The body cam's night vision shows what's beneath the lace. Skin stretched over bone, bone white and translucent, pulled tight across a skull that's somehow still animated with expression. The eyes are completely black, not shadowed, not dark brown, but black like holes opened into nothing. Dark fluid runs from those empty sockets, trailing down the white skin, like tears that have been falling for decades. And the mouth is open in a grin that's too wide, showing teeth that are too long, a smile that belongs on something that died smiling and never stopped. The voice comes from somewhere inside that grinning skull, but it doesn't sound like it's coming from a mouth or throat. It sounds like wind moving through a crypt, like air pushed through stone chambers, like words formed from everything cold and buried. You're standing where I sleep. Hayes staggers backward. The body cam view jerks violently. His breathing becomes ragged gasps. The woman's body remains kneeling at the grave, perfectly still. But her twisted head follows his movement, tracking him with those black, weeping eyes. The roses at the grave begin to wither. Their white petals turn brown, then black, curling and falling away. In seconds, they're nothing but dried stems. The woman's hands release from her lap. They touch the ground in front of her, palms pressing into the grass, and she begins to crawl. Her body lurches forward while her head remains locked on Hayes, still twisted backward, still grinning. Her arms extend with joints that bend wrong, elbows that hinge too far, wrists that rotate in directions human anatomy doesn't allow. Her movement is rapid, skittering, like something that learned to crawl by watching insects. Hayes turns and runs. The body cam bounces wildly, showing flashes of headstones and fog and dark grass. His footsteps are heavy, panicked. Behind him, getting closer, is the sound of her movement, not footsteps. A dragging, scraping sound, like bone on soil, like something being pulled across the ground by force that has nothing to do with muscles or limbs. Hayes's breathing is pure terror now, harsh and desperate. He trips. The footage shows his perspective tumbling, the sky and earth reversing, his hands reaching out too late. He lands hard. The body cam strikes something, a grave marker, a low stone border, and the view jerks to one side, coming to rest facing upward. Hayes is on the ground, trying to rise, his movements visible at the edge of frame. The woman enters the shot from above. She's no longer crawling. She's suspended somehow, hovering over him, defying gravity or simply ignoring it. Her body is upright now, arms hanging at her sides, but her head is still reversed, still showing that bone-white face with its black eyes and too wide smile. The dark tears have reached her chin, dripping onto her dress, onto Hayes below. She descends slowly, her face filling more and more of the frame, coming closer until every detail is visible, the translucent quality of her skin, the way her grin doesn't move or shift but seems frozen in permanent expression, the absolute emptiness of those black eye sockets. She's inches from the camera when she speaks again, her voice somehow louder and softer than before. "You disturbed my sleep. You stood on my bed. The body cam footage cuts to black, not gradually, instantaneously. One frame showing her face filling the screen, the next frame showing nothing. The audio continues for 3 more seconds, Hayes screaming, a sound so raw and primal it barely sounds human. And beneath it, or through it, a sound like wind through an open grave, like breath from lungs that shouldn't be breathing. Then silence. Hayes was discovered at 6:47 a.m. by the opening shift. He was lying on the grass 15 feet from grave 447B, unconscious but breathing. His body cam was still recording, showing only black screen. Paramedics found no physical injuries. His vital signs were stable, but when he regained consciousness in the ambulance, he began screaming again, the same sound from the footage, and had to be sedated. He quit his position that morning from his hospital bed, signing the resignation papers with a hand that shook so badly he could barely write his name. Vasquez attempted to interview him twice. The first time, Hayes sat in silence for 45 minutes without speaking or making eye contact. The second time, he spoke only once, his voice barely a whisper. "She's still down there. She's always been down there. And I woke her up." Vasquez closed the case file on March 5th with a notation of unresolved anomalous surveillance activity. The cemetery installed new fencing around Section 400 and posted warnings about uneven ground and low visibility at night. Guards were instructed to monitor the area remotely, never to approach grave 447B directly during overnight hours. The surveillance footage still shows the woman arriving at 2 a.m., still shows her kneeling, placing roses, remaining motionless for 47 minutes. Still shows her departing at 2:47 a.m., walking back into the darkness at the edge of frame. Night after night, month after month, the routine never varies. The vigil continues, and no one approaches her anymore. Robert Hayes moved 3 states away. He refuses to discuss Riverside Memorial Park. The only time he broke his silence was in a letter to Detective Vasquez, received 6 months after the incident. It contained a single sentence, written in that same shaking hand. "I dream about her face every night, and in the dreams, she's still getting closer. The night deepens. Our third account emerges from the archives, another fragment of terror preserved in the records." Park Ranger Thomas Bright filed his official incident report on November 14th, documenting what he described as sustained audio anomalies within Willowbrook Cemetery's Children's Memorial Garden. The garden occupies a secluded corner of the grounds, dedicated to 43 children who perished during the diphtheria epidemic that swept through the county between 1,889 and 1,920. The headstones, each no taller than 2 feet, form concentric circles beneath ancient oak trees whose branches create a canopy so dense that sunlight barely penetrates even at noon. Bright's investigation began after cemetery visitors repeatedly reported hearing children's laughter and singing well after sunset, after the gates had been locked and the grounds secured. His report, later sealed by county officials, includes audio recordings and thermal imaging data that remain unexplained to this day. What follows is reconstructed from Bright's official documentation, his personal notes, and the recordings themselves. Thomas Bright had worked as head ranger at Willowbrook for 11 years. He knew every path, every monument, every tree on the 100-acre property. He'd walked the grounds in all seasons, at all hours, and prided himself on maintaining the cemetery's dignity and peace. The Children's Memorial Garden had always been one of the quieter sections, a place where mourners came to leave flowers and small toys, honoring children whose graves had long ago been forgotten by living relatives. The first complaint arrived on November 1st. An elderly woman visiting her husband's grave reported hearing children singing nursery rhymes near the garden around sunset. She'd investigated, expecting to find trespassers, but found the garden empty. The singing continued, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She left quickly, disturbed by the sound of laughter that followed her to the parking lot. 3 more reports came within the week. Different visitors, different times, same phenomenon. Children's voices, laughter, singing, sometimes crying emanating from the memorial garden after dark. Bright dismissed the first few reports as acoustic tricks, whined through the trees, perhaps sound carrying from the elementary school 2 blocks away. But the complaints persisted, and the descriptions were too consistent to ignore. On November 7th, Bright decided to investigate properly. He entered the garden just before sunset, carrying a digital audio recorder and settling himself on a stone bench near the center of the concentric circles. The headstones surrounded him, small and white, many decorated with carved lambs or angels. Names and dates were still legible on most. Emma, age 4. Jonathan, age 7. Sarah, age 3. 43 children, their lives ending before they'd barely begun. Darkness fell. The November air turned cold, and Bright pulled his jacket tighter. The cemetery settled into its nocturnal quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy. Expectant, he sat motionless, recorder running, listening. Then another. Nothing unusual. Just wind rustling dried leaves and the distant sound of traffic. At 11:34 p.m., the recorder's display flickered. Bright leaned forward, watching the audio levels spike despite the continued silence around him. Then he heard a child's voice, clear and distinct, coming from somewhere among the headstones. "Why won't you play with us?" The question hung in the cold air. Bright's breath caught. He stood slowly, turning in a circle, scanning the darkness between the graves. Nothing moved. No children. No people at all. Just the stones and the shadows and the skeletal branches overhead. He rewound the recording and listened through headphones. The voice was there, unmistakable. A young boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, speaking with perfect clarity. But Bright had been sitting in the garden center. He would have seen anyone approaching. The gates were locked. He was alone. He returned the next night with additional equipment, a second recorder, a video camera with night vision capability, and a high-powered flashlight. He documented everything methodically, noting temperature, wind conditions, ambient noise levels. At 11:30 p.m., the voices began. This time there were multiple children. They spoke over each other, their words overlapping, but all asking variations of the same question. "Won't you play? Play with us. Why don't you play?" The voices seemed to move between the headstones, circling the garden's perimeter. Bright's flashlight beam swept across the graves, illuminating nothing but stone and grass. The third night brought 4 distinct voices. The fourth night, 7. Each night, the phenomenon began precisely at 11:30 p.m. and lasted approximately 15 minutes. The voices grew more insistent, more urgent. They didn't sound playful anymore. There was something demanding in their tone, something that made Bright's skin crawl. By night 5, Bright had documented clear patterns. The voices always originated from different sections of the garden but moved in a clockwise rotation around the center. They asked their question repeatedly, sometimes singing it, sometimes whispering it, occasionally screaming it. The audio levels suggested the sources were close within 10 or 15 feet, yet Bright saw nothing with his flashlight or night vision camera. On the 6th night, November 12th. Bright brought thermal imaging equipment borrowed from the County Wildlife Division. He positioned himself at the exact center of the concentric circles, surrounded by recording devices and cameras. The night was particularly cold, frost already forming on the grass. He checked his watch. 11:25 p.m. 5 minutes. At exactly 11:30 p.m., the temperature plummeted. Bright watched his thermometer drop from 38 degrees to 20 degrees Fahrenheit in 90 seconds. His breath became thick clouds of vapor. Ice crystals formed on the headstones. And the voices began, but different this time. Stronger, clearer, closer. Bright raised the thermal camera and looked through the viewfinder. His hands started shaking. The screen showed 43 heat signatures, small figures, child-sized, positioned at each headstone. They registered as cold spots against the frozen ground, impossibly cold, blue and purple on the thermal spectrum, as if radiating an absence of heat. The voices rose in unison, no longer asking but chanting. Play with us. Play with us. Play with us. The rhythm was mechanical, synchronized, like a recording played over and over. But these weren't recordings. The thermal signatures were moving. Bright watched through the camera as the 43 shapes began to shift, leaving their positions at the headstones. They moved inward, toward him, converging on the center of the garden. The chanting grew louder, echoing off the surrounding trees. His audio recorders clipped with distortion, unable to capture the volume. He lowered the thermal camera and raised his flashlight, hands trembling. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the approaching space. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then the light caught something translucent, gray, moving between two headstones. A child, or what had once been a child. The figure was small, no more than 3 feet tall, its form wavering like smoke but solid enough to cast a shadow. Its skin was the color of ash, stretched too tight over bones that seemed wrong, too angular, too sharp. The eyes were hollow pits, black and empty. The mouth hung open, impossibly wide, revealing darkness inside. Bright's light found another, then another. They were crawling between the graves on hands and knees, joints bending in ways that defied anatomy. Their arms bent backward at the elbows, their necks twisted at severe angles. They moved in jerking, stuttering motions, like insects, like marionettes operated by drunk puppeteers. The chanting continued. But now Bright could see their mouths moving in perfect synchronization. Play with us, play with us, play with us. 43 children, crawling toward him, surrounding him in tightening circles. Their gray, translucent forms flickered in and out of visibility. When his flashlight beam hit them directly, they became more solid, more defined, their features sharpening into expressions of desperate hunger. One of them reached the inner circle of headstones, only feet away. Bright could see its face clearly now, a girl, perhaps 5 years old, with hollow eyes and that grotesquely stretched mouth. Her fingers were elongated, each joint swollen and wrong. She reached toward him, her hand extending farther than any arm should reach. Bright stumbled backward, his equipment scattering. The thermal camera fell and its screen shattered, but not before he saw what it registered: 43 shapes now within 6 feet of him, their cold signatures overwhelming the display. More of them emerged fully into his flashlight beam. A boy missing half his jaw. A girl whose head rotated completely backward on her neck. Children with limbs that bent in 3, 4, 5 places. Their movements were synchronized now, all crawling forward in the same jerking rhythm, hands and knees striking the frozen ground in unison. The chanting stopped. In the sudden silence, one voice spoke, coming from all of them simultaneously. Why won't you play with us? Why won't you play with us? Then the faces changed. The mouths stretched wider, splitting the gray skin. The hollow eyes filled with something dark and writhing. The expressions twisted from pleading to rage, from desperation to hatred. A sound emerged from those impossibly open mouths, not children's laughter anymore, but screaming, raw and animalistic. They lunged. Bright ran. He crashed through the outer ring of headstones, abandoning his equipment, his documentation. Behind him came the sound of small hands slapping frozen ground, moving fast, moving together. The screaming followed, joined now by laughter that sounded like breaking glass. He didn't look back, couldn't look back. His flashlight beam bounced wildly as he sprinted between monuments and trees, making for the main gate 200 yards away. The temperature around him fluctuated violently, freezing cold one moment, then normal November night air the next. Something grabbed his ankle. Bright fell hard, his flashlight skittering away across the path. He kicked frantically and felt his boot connect with something solid but yielding, like kicking through cobwebs made of ice. The grip released and he scrambled to his feet, running again without retrieving the light. The laughter was right behind him, multiple voices overlapping, too close. He felt something brush his shoulder, those elongated fingers, reaching. His jacket ripped. Cold air touched his skin where the fabric tore. Bright reached the gate and vaulted over it, his ranger keys left behind in the garden with everything else. He didn't stop running until he reached his truck in the parking lot. Only then did he look back toward the children's memorial garden. 43 small shapes stood at the cemetery's edge, translucent and gray in the moonlight, watching him. Their faces were still twisted in rage, mouths still stretched too wide. They stood perfectly motionless, arranged in a line, like children waiting for recess to end. Then, as he watched, they faded. Not quickly, but gradually, becoming more transparent until only suggestions of shapes remained. Then nothing but darkness and headstones and the skeletal branches of oak trees. Bright drove straight to the county sheriff's office and filed his report. The next morning, deputies retrieved his equipment from the garden. The recordings were intact. Every device had captured the voices, the chanting, the screaming. The thermal camera's last images showed those 43 cold signatures surrounding the spot where Bright had stood. But the audio from the final moments contained something else, something that made the sheriff seal the case file immediately. Under the screaming and laughter, beneath the sounds of Bright's escape, the recorders had captured his own voice, calm and clear, speaking words he has no memory of saying. "Yes, I'll play with you. I'll stay here and play with you forever." The Children's Memorial Garden was closed to public access the following week. Official explanation: structural concerns with the historic headstones requiring restoration work. That work has never begun. The garden remains behind locked fencing, accessible only to county maintenance staff who refuse to enter after dark. Thomas Bright resigned from his position on November 20th. He left no forwarding address. His final notation in the incident report consisted of a single sentence, written in handwriting that degraded from his usual neat script to barely legible scrawl. "They're still calling, and I'm afraid one night I'll answer." The archives grow heavier as the night deepens. What follows is drawn from sealed maintenance records and psychiatric evaluation files that were never meant to surface. In August 2019, Street, Michael's cemetery in New Orleans contracted routine structural maintenance on the deteriorating Brennan family crypt, a limestone monument erected in 1901 that had begun showing water damage along its foundation. The job fell to David Orozco, a 28-year-old maintenance specialist with 12 years of cemetery restoration experience. The work required interior access to assess stone integrity and apply modern waterproofing compounds. What began as standard preservation work would conclude with psychiatric intervention and the permanent sealing of a structure that now carries a municipal order forbidding entry. The following account is reconstructed from Orozco's field notes, his supervisor's incident reports, head-mounted camera footage recovered from the site, and the psychiatric evaluation that ended his career. The Brennan crypt has been sealed since August 19, 2019. Scratching sounds have been reported from within by multiple groundskeepers. The first descent occurred on August 9th under optimal conditions. Orozco descended the stone steps at 2:15 p.m., the Louisiana heat creating visible shimmer above the cemetery grounds. The iron door opened with effort, its hinges protesting decades of neglect. His flashlight swept a chamber roughly 12 feet square, walls lined with alcoves containing 6 stone coffins, 3 per side, arranged with mathematical precision. The air inside registered cool, remarkably dry for a structure showing exterior water damage. Dust particles drifted through his light beam. The coffins themselves appeared undisturbed, their lids sealed with the original mortar. Names and dates carved in flowing script. Margaret Brennan, 1000. 823 to 1901. Thomas Brennan, 1000. 845 to 1903. 4 others from the same bloodline, the last interred in 1957. Orozco photographed each surface, documented the wall composition, measured moisture levels. His field notes described the space as unremarkable, structurally sound, minimal restoration required. He completed the assessment in 47 minutes, secured the iron door, and reported his findings to the cemetery administration. The waterproofing could proceed with standard protocols. 3 days passed before his second visit. August 12th arrived with the same oppressive heat, the same cicada drone filling the cemetery grounds. Orozco returned to the Brennan crypt at 1:30 p.m., carrying waterproofing compound and application tools. He unlocked the iron door, noting slight resistance where none had existed before, and descended into the chamber. His flashlight found the space exactly as he'd left it. Almost. The coffins occupied the same alcoves, bore the same carved names, showed the same age-worn surfaces, but their positions had shifted. The leftmost coffin, which had been aligned perfectly parallel to the wall, now sat rotated approximately 5 degrees clockwise. The center coffin on the opposite side showed similar rotation, counterclockwise. Subtle changes, nearly imperceptible. But Orozco had documented the original positions with photographs. He consulted his phone, comparing images. The discrepancies were unmistakable. He circled the chamber slowly, flashlight beam tracking each surface. Fresh scratch marks scored the interior of the iron door, 4 parallel gouges in the metal, starting at handle height and dragging downward. The marks hadn't been there 3 days ago. Orozco photographed the evidence, then examined the coffins themselves. No signs of tampering. The mortar seals remained intact. The stone showed no tool marks. Yet, they had moved. His supervisor dismissed the concerns. Structural settling, differential pressure from the waterproofing process, natural shifts in 100-year-old masonry. The cemetery had employed security since 1995, motion sensors, nightly patrols. No unauthorized entry had been logged. Vandalism was impossible. Orozco was instructed to proceed with the waterproofing on August 18th to complete the contract before the autumn rains arrived. He protested. His supervisor noted the protest in the administrative file, then reiterated the work order. The Brennan Family Trust paid substantial fees for perpetual care. The waterproofing would be completed as scheduled. August 18th came with atmospheric pressure that made breathing difficult. Storm systems building in the Gulf, air thick enough to taste. Orozco arrived at the crypt at 3 p.m., accompanied this time by his supervisor's mandate to wear a head-mounted camera for documentation of the application process. Though both men understood it was to verify completion of disputed work, the camera began recording as Orozco descended the stone steps. The iron door opened more easily than before, as if the hinges had been recently used. The chamber's interior appeared unchanged from his last visit, coffins occupying their rotated positions, scratch marks still visible on the door's interior surface. The air felt different, heavier, humid despite the previous measurements showing dryness. Orozco set up his work lights, arranged his materials, began applying the waterproofing compound to the chamber's western wall. The footage shows him working in silence, methodical movements, professional efficiency. His breathing remained steady through the respirator. The work lights cast harsh shadows, making the coffins appear to recede into their alcoves. 23 minutes pass. The compound goes on smoothly, filling microscopic cracks in the limestone. 31 minutes. He moves to the northern wall, the camera capturing his gloved hands, spreading material across stone that had witnessed more than a century of darkness. 47 minutes. The southern wall, nearest the deepest alcove where the oldest Brennan rested. The camera's audio picks up his breathing, the wet sound of compound application, the distant rumble of approaching thunder. Nothing else. Then, at timestamp 3:47 p.m., Orozco stops moving. The footage shows him frozen mid-stroke, head tilted slightly toward the deepest alcove. His hand lowers slowly, the application tool forgotten. For 9 seconds he remains motionless, the camera aimed at the coffin containing Margaret Brennan, the matriarch, dead for 118 years. When he speaks, his voice barely rises above a whisper. Someone's breathing. The camera's audio enhancement captures what follows a slow, wet inhalation from somewhere within the chamber. Not a single source, multiple sources. Overlapping, the sound of lungs filling after long deprivation. The breathing continues, rhythmic, deliberate. Orozco's flashlight beam sweeps across the alcoves. The work lights illuminate the chamber but leave the deepest recesses in shadow. Then he sees it, condensation forming on the coffin lids, moisture beading on cold stone, visible even in the warm Louisiana air. Condensation that forms from the inside, from warm breath meeting cool stone, from something living where nothing should live. Movement registers in his peripheral vision. The leftmost coffin, Thomas Brennan, died 1,903 shifts slightly within its alcove. The sound is unmistakable. Stone scraping stone, the coffin lid moving a fraction of an inch. Heavy weight displaced by force from within. Orozco backs toward the chamber entrance, his breathing accelerating inside the respirator. The camera captures his retreat, the image bouncing with each backward step. Behind him, the breathing intensifies. All 6 coffins begin shaking simultaneously, gentle tremors that build into sustained vibrations. Dust falls from the alcoves. The chamber fills with the sound of stone grinding against stone, of something confined trying desperately to emerge. The center coffin on the eastern wall the camera catches. It clearly shows movement beneath its lid. The heavy stone slab, mortared in place for decades, rises an inch, 2 inches. Something pushes from below with inexorable strength. Then a hand emerges from the gap, sliding out with terrible purpose. The hand is gray, tissue desiccated and clinging to bone. But the fingers flex with muscular precision, tendons working beneath papery skin, nails yellow and thick, crusted with the residue of decay. The hand grips the coffin's edge, pulling, creating leverage. More hands appear. From the leftmost coffin, from the one nearest the door, from Margaret Brennan's resting place, gray hands with spotted skin, with fingers that bend at wrong angles but still function, still grasp, still search for purchase in the world they'd been forced to leave. The breathing becomes words. The camera's audio captures them clearly despite Orozco's rising panic. Let us out. The voice comes from multiple throats, speaking in unison, a chorus of the dead making demands of the living. Let us out. Let us out. The words repeat with mechanical precision, without emotion, without inflection, a recording played back through damaged vocal cords, through lungs that hadn't drawn breath in lifetimes. The hands multiply. 6 hands, 10, 12, each coffin contributing its dead to the effort, each Brennan demanding release from stone and darkness. Then the faces appear. Orozco screams the sound raw and primal, cutting through the documentary calm that had preceded this moment. The camera captures what drove him to that edge. Pale faces pressing against the gaps where coffin lids had shifted, pressing hard enough to widen those gaps, to create space where none should exist. Eyes filmed white with cataracts of death, pupils dilated black behind the clouded tissue. Mouths working soundlessly at first, then forming words. The lips cracked and colorless, but mobile, functional, speaking in that unified voice. Let us out. Please, let us out. The faces show remnants of identity. Margaret Brennan's high cheekbones, still visible beneath skin, stretched tight over skull. Thomas Brennan's strong jaw, present despite the collapse of surrounding tissue. They were people once. They remembered being people. But what stared from those gaps between stone and darkness had transcended humanity, had become something that existed in the space between death and whatever came after. Orozco crawled. The footage shows his hands scraping against stone floor. The camera aimed backward, capturing the chamber as he fled. The faces followed his movement, tracking him with those white eyes, watching him retreat toward the iron door. The hands reached farther from the coffins, arms extending with joints that bent too many times, reaching for him with fingers that scratched against stone, leaving marks identical to those he'd found days earlier. He reached the entrance, hauled himself up the steps, his respirator torn away in his panic. The last image before he sealed the iron door shows all 6 coffins, with lids displaced, hands protruding, faces visible in the gaps, and that voice, that terrible unified voice, still repeating its demand. Let us out. Let us out. Let us out. The camera was recovered from where Orozco dropped it outside the crypt. He was found by cemetery security at 4:23 p.m., sitting against a neighboring monument, staring at the Brennan crypt's sealed entrance. He had used his work tools to jam the iron door shut, wedging metal against stone with strength born from absolute terror. He didn't speak for 6 hours. The psychiatric evaluation, conducted over the following week, documented severe trauma response, acute anxiety disorder, and persistent auditory hallucinations consisting of breathing sounds and whispered demands for release. He was placed on permanent medical leave. He never returned to cemetery work. The footage was reviewed by cemetery administration, by structural engineers, by a forensic psychologist attempting to contextualize Orozco's breakdown. All confirmed the video's authenticity. No evidence of manipulation, no digital artifacts suggesting alteration. What the camera recorded had occurred. The Brennan Family Trust was contacted. They authorized permanent sealing of the crypt, the application of modern locks and reinforcement bars, the installation of a concrete cap over the entrance. The work was completed on August 23, 2019. The workers reported hearing sounds from within during the sealing process, breathing, scratching, voices too muffled to distinguish words. The crypt remains sealed. Municipal records show a standing order forbidding entry, filed under structural hazard protocols, though the paperwork makes no mention of structural concerns. Groundskeepers working in the surrounding area have reported sounds emanating from within the Brennan crypt, scratching against stone, rhythmic breathing, and occasionally, on still nights when humidity hangs heavy over New Orleans, voices speaking in unison, repeating the same 3 words over and over. Security footage shows no unauthorized access. Motion sensors register no movement. The sounds continue regardless. The Brennan family has offered no comment on the incident. 6 bodies remain interred within the sealed crypt, their coffins displaced, their lids shifted, their hands reaching toward an exit they can no longer access. The footage captured on August 18th has been archived in sealed psychiatric case files, classified as traumatic evidence in an ongoing medical disability claim. But those who have viewed it report the same observation. In the final frames, before Orozco sealed the door, the faces visible in the coffin gaps were not looking at him. They were looking past him, toward the world beyond the crypt, towards sunlight and air and the cemetery grounds where the living still walked. They were looking out with longing, and they were still asking, still demanding, still pleading for the only thing they wanted: release. The archives demand we continue. Another witness. Another night that refused to end. The case file arrived at the precinct cold 3 years after Sarah Reeves disappeared. What broke it open wasn't new evidence or a confession. It was a forgotten cloud storage account, its subscription about to expire, flagged by an automated system. Inside, 47 photographs that document the last 6 hours of a woman's life with clinical precision. The images were recovered from her professional account on October 2nd, 3 days after her disappearance. Crime scene investigators reconstructed her final project from metadata timestamps, voice notes, and the camera equipment found abandoned at the gates of Maplewood Cemetery's oldest section, a place locals had avoided for generations, though few could articulate why. What follows is assembled from police documentation, digital forensics reports, and the recovered audio from Sarah Reeves's voice recorder. Her camera captured what she couldn't see. The recording captured what she finally understood too late. Sarah Reeves had built a modest career photographing what others preferred to forget. Abandoned hospitals, foreclosed homes, the architectural bones of failure. She called it documentary decay, selling prints to art galleries in the city and maintaining a respectable online following. Her next project, Eternal Rest, would focus exclusively on Maplewood Cemetery, specifically the pre-1900 section, where the county had stopped maintenance decades ago. She'd filed the proper permits, informed the groundskeeper of her schedule, and arrived at the cemetery gates at 7:47 p.m. on September 28th, according to parking lot security footage. The footage shows her entering with a rolling equipment case, 2 camera bags, and a thermos. She wore practical clothes, dark jeans, a thermal jacket, comfortable boots. The last frame captures her silhouette passing through the wrought iron gates as sunset bled across the horizon. The first 12 photographs show exactly what she intended to capture. Ornate Victorian headstones listing toward Earth, angel statuary with features smoothed by a century of weather, marble mausoleums with their doors sealed by rust and time. She worked methodically, her voice notes providing technical commentary, aperture settings, ISO adjustments, composition thoughts. Her tone remained professional, almost detached. Image 7 shows a particularly striking monument, a weeping angel with one hand extended, as if reaching for something just beyond the frame. Image 9 captures a family plot ringed by corroded iron fencing, the names barely legible in the moonlight. By Image 12, taken at 9:23 p.m. according to metadata, she had moved deeper into the cemetery's oldest quadrant, where the paths dissolved into overgrown grass and the trees grew dense enough to block ambient light from the distant street. The isolation here is perfect. Her voice note for Image 13 states, "No light pollution, no modern distractions, just stone and silence and time." Her breathing sounds steady, calm. She pauses the recording to adjust her tripod, and in that silence, the audio captures something else. The distant rustle of leaves. Though the September night was documented as windless, she doesn't mention it. Image 14 shows a collapsed crypt, its entrance partially visible through broken marble. Image 15 captures the hollow doorway. Darkness, absolute, beyond the threshold. Image 16 pans across a section where headstones had fallen like dominoes, creating abstract patterns in the moonlight. Image 22 arrives at 10:41 p.m. The composition focuses on an impressive memorial, a life-sized statue of a woman in repose, hands folded across her chest, expression serene. Sarah had positioned herself 30 feet back to capture the full monument against the sky. The focus is sharp, the exposure is balanced, and in the background, perhaps 70 feet behind the statue, barely visible between 2 listing headstones, a pale vertical shape. The figure is so distant, so underexposed, that it could be mistaken for a monument. Could be. But monuments don't stand in the spaces between graves. Monuments occupy their own plots, their own foundations. This shape occupies negative space, standing where nothing should stand. Image 23, taken 4 minutes later, shows the same memorial from a slightly different angle. The figure appears again, now perhaps 50 feet from Sarah's position. It remains in the background, still blurred by distance, but clearly closer. The shape suggests human proportions, tall, thin, wearing something pale that catches moonlight. Sarah's voice note for this image discusses shadow depth and architectural lines. She doesn't mention the figure. Either she hadn't noticed it, or her camera's viewfinder, concentrated on foreground focus, hadn't made it apparent. The progression continues with mathematical precision. Image 24. The figure is 40 feet away, positioned behind a tilted cross-shaped headstone. Image 25. 35 feet, now visible between 2 crypts. Image 26. 30 feet, standing beside a broken angel statue. With each photograph, the figure moves closer while remaining in the background of Sarah's compositions, as if carefully staying within the frame but not drawing attention. Sarah's voice notes continue their technical observations, her tone unchanged, discussing aperture priority and long exposure techniques. At 11:17 p.m., she pauses to eat something. Rapper sounds rustle near the microphone and mentions that the cemetery's atmosphere is exactly what the series needs. By image 30, taken at 11:52 p.m., the figure appears in every subsequent photograph, regardless of Sarah's chosen subject or angle. She photographs a row of identical headstones for Civil War soldiers. The figure stands at the row's end, 20 feet away. She captures a tilted obelisk memorial. The figure is positioned just behind it, 18 feet distant. She documents a family mausoleum's sealed door. The figure stands to the left of the frame, 15 feet from her position. The pattern becomes undeniable in retrospect. Whatever this presence was, it had synchronized its movement with Sarah's, maintaining a decreasing distance with each shot while staying within her camera's field of view. And still, her voice notes contain no acknowledgement, no concern, no indication she had seen anything unusual. Image 38 marks the transformation. Sarah had positioned herself before a particularly degraded section where graves from the 1,870 seconds had subsided into the earth, creating a depression filled with dead leaves and broken stone fragments. She aimed her camera toward the depression, using a longer exposure to capture detail in the shadows. The figure stands 15 feet away, fully illuminated by her camera's focusing light. The details are now undeniable. A woman, impossibly tall, perhaps 7 feet, and thin to the point of emaciation. She wears what appears to be a burial gown, once white, but now rotted to gray-brown tatters that hang from skeletal shoulders. Her skin stretches tight across prominent bones, gray as old newspaper, mottled with darker patches. Her hair hangs in long, matted strands around a gaunt face. But it's her eyes that dominate the image. They reflect the camera's focusing beam with a bright tapetum lucidum shine, like an animal's eyes catching light. No human eyes reflect that way. The woman's mouth hangs slightly open, revealing darkness inside. Her hands hang at her sides, fingers too long, joints too pronounced. Sarah's voice note for image 38 lasts 3 seconds. What the? Then silence. Then the click of the next shutter. Image 39. 10 feet. The woman has moved closer with impossible speed, now dominating the frame's right side. Her head tilts at an unnatural angle, as if her neck cannot fully support its weight. Her jaw has dropped further, revealing that the darkness inside her mouth extends too deep, as if her throat opens onto some impossible depth. Her hands have begun to rise, those elongated fingers spreading. The burial gown's tatters shift around her, though no wind moves the dead leaves at her feet. Image 40. Close enough to count her teeth. Or rather, to see where teeth should be but aren't just black gaps in gray gums. Her jaw hangs completely loose now, suspended as if the hinge has broken, revealing an interior that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her skeletal hands reach toward the camera, each finger bent at multiple joints, the nails long and yellowed. Her eyes fill with reflected light, twin circles of unnatural brightness in that cadaverous face. Every detail is sharp. The texture of her decayed skin, the individual strands of her matted hair, the way her burial gown has partially fused with the gray flesh beneath. Sarah's breathing has changed on the audio recording. Rapid, shallow, the rustle of her jacket as she moves. No voice note, just breathing and the mechanical sound of her camera's shutter. Images 41 through 47 arrive in rapid succession, timestamps indicating she shot them within 90 seconds. The woman's skeletal hands fill more of each frame, reaching closer, those impossible fingers spreading wider. Her mouth opens further with each shot, the jaw extending impossibly, the darkness inside seeming to grow deeper. By image 44, her hands nearly touch the camera lens. Image 45 shows her mouth opened so wide her face seems to split around it, the blackness inside now dominating the frame. Image 46 captures her hands making contact with the lens, skeletal fingers splaying across the glass, blocking most of the composition. Image 47 shows only darkness and 2 white eyes. The entire frame is black except for those reflected circles of light. positioned where a face would be if it pressed directly against the camera lens. The darkness is absolute. The eyes are perfectly focused. Metadata timestamps this image at 12:31 a.m., September 29th. The voice recorder captures what happened next. The audio quality is poor. The device was apparently in Sarah's jacket pocket, but the sequence is clear. Heavy breathing. The rustle of equipment being gathered hastily. Footsteps, quick and uneven. Then her voice, tight with confusion. Wrong direction. That's wrong. That's a pause. More footsteps. Faster now. Then Sarah's voice rises. Why am I following myself? The words sound genuinely bewildered, as if she's discovered something impossible. More running. Her breathing becomes ragged, desperate. Equipment clatters, something dropped or knocked over. Then her footsteps stop abruptly. A long moment of silence broken only by her panicked breathing. When she speaks again, her voice has changed, becoming high and thin with terror. That's not me. That's not my face. That's not my face. The scream that follows lasts 4 seconds before cutting off with the sound of the recorder hitting the ground. The audio continues for another 37 seconds. Rustling sounds, distant movement, then a wet, dragging noise that fades into silence. Police discovered Sarah Reeves' equipment at 6:15 a.m. on September 29th, found by the groundskeeper beginning his morning rounds. Her camera lay on the path near the cemetery's main gates, its body smashed but its memory card intact. Her tripod was found collapsed nearby. Her voice recorder lay in the grass 15 feet away, still running, battery nearly depleted. Her rolling equipment case sat beside the gates, unopened. Her thermos remained where she'd left it, perched on a headstone in the old section. Her car sat undisturbed in the parking lot, keys in the ignition. Sarah Reeves herself was never found. The investigation treated it as a disappearance with suspicious circumstances. The photographs were analyzed by multiple forensic specialists. The consensus: no evidence of digital manipulation, no signs of staging. The images showed exactly what the camera captured. The figure appeared real, physical, present. Analysis of the final image revealed one detail the investigators initially missed. The technical team enhanced the woman's reflected eyes, magnifying them to examine the reflection within the reflection. The image quality degraded significantly with magnification, but the shape was clear enough. A human figure holding a camera, photographing the photographer. The reflection showed Sarah Reeves watching herself being captured. The woman's eyes had held Sarah's image, even as Sarah's camera held the woman's. The cemetery's records were examined. The oldest section contains 847 graves, most dating between 1,840 and 1,895. 17 graves hold unidentified bodies, women found dead without identification, buried by the county. The records described them only as unknown female with dates of interment. None of the graves had been disturbed. None showed signs of vandalism or desecration. But maintenance records noted something peculiar. Multiple groundskeepers over the decades had reported unusual damage to cameras or phones after working in the old section. Equipment would malfunction. Lenses would crack. Memory cards would corrupt. 3 different workers had quit after reporting that photographs taken in the area sometimes showed someone who wasn't there. Management had dismissed these reports as superstition or equipment failure. Sarah Reeves' cloud storage account remains active, maintained by her family. The 47 photographs are still there, backed up and preserved. Police kept copies for the investigation file. Occasionally, someone requests to see them, a detective reviewing cold cases, a family member seeking closure, a journalist researching the story. Everyone who views the complete sequence reports the same discomfort. The progression feels intentional, choreographed, as if the figure knew it was being documented, as if it wanted to be photographed, as if Sarah's camera had captured exactly what it intended to show. The last image, the darkness and the eyes, has been examined hundreds of times by investigators, forensic specialists, and digital analysts. The eyes never change. They stare from the black with perfect clarity, reflecting light that should not be there, holding an image that should not exist. And in that reflection, enhanced and magnified until the pixels dissolve into approximation, Sarah Reeves stands with her camera raised, capturing the moment she becomes part of someone else's collection. The woman in the burial gown had been photographing her all along, using Sarah's own camera, waiting for the moment when photographer and subject would finally meet face to face in the darkness between frames. The archives refused to close. This next account was sealed for 2 decades before being declassified under witness protection protocols. Raymond Coates spent 22 years as head gravedigger at Pine Haven Cemetery, working through rain, snow, and the kind of October nights when fog settles between headstones like something breathing. He knew the weight of soil, the sound a shovel makes against different types of earth, the way morning dew collects on fresh-turned dirt. He understood the rhythm of his work, the predictable, mechanical certainty of preparing the ground for the dead. That understanding ended in Section 7, where the earth had developed its own agenda. County records contain his full deposition, filed 3 days before his resignation, describing a phenomenon that turned his final night at Pine Haven into something that still requires explanation. The testimony includes motion-activated camera footage, audio recordings, and ground-penetrating radar results that municipal authorities have refused to make public. What follows has been reconstructed from Coates's sworn statement and the physical evidence that accompanied it. Section 7 occupied the northeast corner of Pine Haven Cemetery, established in 1847 during the town's first population expansion. The oldest graves there predated proper record-keeping, their markers worn smooth by weather and time. Newer plots surrounded these ancient stones, creating a patchwork of eras where Victorian monuments stood beside modern flat markers. Coates had worked Section 7 for the entire span of his career, digging perhaps 300 graves in that particular earth. The soil there possessed different characteristics than the rest of the cemetery, darker, heavier, with a clay content that made it difficult to work even in dry weather. It held moisture longer, retained cold deeper into spring, and had a smell Coates described as old rain and iron. The problems began in late September, when overnight maintenance workers noticed that freshly dug graves in Section 7 were partially filled by morning. Not collapsed filled. Soil that had been removed and piled beside the grave would be reduced by half, sometimes more, redistributed back into the hole as if someone had worked through the night shoveling it back. Cemetery administration initially suspected vandalism, but security cameras showed nothing. The refilling happened between checks, during the hours when no one walked the grounds. When motion sensors detected only wind-moved branches and the occasional deer passing through. Coates examined the phenomenon himself after the 4th occurrence. The soil inside the partially filled graves showed no tool marks, no evidence of shovels or machinery. It simply appeared there, layer after layer, packed with the kind of density that normally required tamping and compression. When he dug the same graves out again, preparing them for their scheduled burials, the removed soil weighed less than it should have, as if something had already extracted its substance, leaving only the appearance of earth behind. The pattern held consistent through October. Every grave dug in Section 7, without exception, was found partially refilled by dawn. Graves dug in other sections remained untouched. Cemetery administration discussed relocating burials to different areas, but Section 7 contained pre-purchased family plots, legal contracts that couldn't simply be voided. The burials proceeded as scheduled, with Coates and his crew removing the mysterious soil each morning before services began, working in silence because there was nothing useful to say about what they were experiencing. On October 30th, Coates submitted a formal request to monitor Section 7 overnight using motion-activated cameras. Administration approved immediately, perhaps hoping for footage that would explain or eliminate the problem. Coates set up 3 cameras around a freshly dug grave plot, 7 to 89, prepared for a burial scheduled the following afternoon. The grave measured regulation dimensions: 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, 6 feet deep. Coates had dug it himself that afternoon, removing exactly 192 cubic feet of soil and piling it on the grave's eastern side, covered with artificial grass matting per standard procedure. He positioned the cameras at 7 p.m., just after sunset. Camera 1 faced the grave from the south, capturing the entire length. Camera 2 covered the pile of removed soil. Camera 3 pointed down into the grave itself, mounted on a portable stand at the edge. All 3 cameras featured motion activation, infrared capability, and continuous audio recording. Coates placed them in weatherproof housings and ran the feeds to a laptop in his truck, parked 30 yards away on the cemetery's maintenance road. The first hour showed nothing. Wind moved through the pines surrounding Section 7, creating shadows that shifted across marble and granite. Coates sat in his truck, drinking coffee that grew cold, while he watched 3 static camera feeds showing an empty grave and undisturbed soil. The temperature dropped as night deepened, settling into the low 40s, and fog began forming in the low places between headstones. At 9:43 p.m., Camera 2 registered movement. The pile of removed soil had shifted slightly, settling under its own weight in a way that looked natural, except for the timing synchronized across the entire pile, as if something had compressed it from within. Coates made a note in his log. The cameras continued recording. Nothing else happened until after midnight. The cemetery achieved the particular silence that comes to places of burial in deep night. Not an absence of sound, but a quality of stillness that seems to absorb noise before it can fully form. Coates's breathing sounded loud inside his truck. His pen, scratching on paper, sounded louder. At 2:15 a.m., Camera 3, the one pointing down into the grave, showed the first clear anomaly. The grave's walls, cut clean and vertical by Coates's careful digging, began losing definition along their edges. Soil started falling inward from all 4 sides simultaneously, not in a collapse pattern but in a steady, deliberate flow. Dirt trickled down from the walls like sand in an hourglass, gathering at the bottom of the grave in growing mounds. Coates leaned forward, studying the feed. The soil fell without any visible cause, no hands disturbing it, no tools breaking it free, no structural failure in the walls. It simply released itself and fell, maintaining a consistent rate across all 4 walls, building up faster than seemed possible from such a thin layer of loss. The camera's microphone picked up sound at 2:19 a.m., scraping metal against stone or bone against earth coming from inside the grave. Then, beneath the scraping, whispered counting, a voice, gender indeterminate, speaking just above the threshold of hearing. 1, 2, 3. Coates grabbed his flashlight and radio, his hands moving automatically while his mind struggled to process what the feed was showing. The grave was filling itself. The counting continued, reaching 7, then 11, then 15. Each number spoken with the same flat intonation. At 2:47 a.m., something emerged from the eastern wall of the grave. Not from beneath, from within the wall itself, as if the soil were permeable, a curtain rather than solid earth. A hand pushed through, fingers spread, pulling at the dirt from inside the grave. The hand was gray, the color of wet clay, with nails black and broken. It gripped the soil and pulled, drawing more earth inward. Another hand emerged from the western wall, then 2 more from the north. Within 30 seconds, dozens of hands pressed through all 4 walls, all pulling, all drawing soil inward with methodical, synchronized movements. They worked in rhythm with the counting, which had reached 31 and showed no sign of stopping. Coates ran. The camera footage shows his approach, flashlight beams swinging wildly, his breathing harsh and rapid through his radio's open channel. He reached the grave's edge at 2:51 a.m., and the flashlight's beam swept across the scene. Hands, dozens of them, emerging from earth that rippled and shifted like water. The counting had reached 43. His voice cracked when he spoke, barely recognizable. "What are you?" The hands stopped. All of them, frozen in mid-pull, fingers still gripping dirt that suddenly seemed reluctant to move. Silence filled Section 7 complete, suffocating silence that the camera microphones captured as a flat line on the audio spectrum. Then, from the grave's depths, voices responded. Not one voice, but many, speaking in perfect unison. creating harmonics that human throats shouldn't produce. We're helping. Faces pressed against the earthen walls where the hands had emerged. The camera captured them in brutal clarity, gray skin stretched over skull structure, eye sockets empty but somehow still focused, mouths open in expressions that might have been screams but produced no sound. Dozens of faces, all different, all pushing through the soil as if it were membrane, watching Coates with their eyeless attention. The hands resumed their work. The voices continued speaking in unison, still saying, "We're helping," but now adding names. Margaret Donovan died April 12th, 1923, said, "I'll see you all in summer." Thomas Chen died November 3rd, 1956, said, "The garden needs watering." Elizabeth Morse died January 8th, 1974, said, "Don't forget to lock the doors." They recited Section 7's buried residents in chronological order, providing death dates and final words that Coates couldn't verify, but knew were accurate in the way you know certain truths without confirmation. The hands pulled faster. The faces pressed harder against the earth. The grave filled with soil that seemed to have more volume than the walls could possibly contain. Coates's camera shows him stumbling backward, flashlight dropping, his silhouette against the infrared glow as he fled toward his truck. The voices followed him not physically, but acoustically, carrying across the cemetery with that same perfect unison. Henry Samuels died March 22nd, 1981, said, "Tell them I wasn't afraid." Patricia Lee died August 15th, 1989, said, "The pills are in the kitchen drawer." He reached his truck at 2:58 a.m. The cameras continued recording. By 3:30 a.m., the grave was completely filled, soil level with the surrounding ground, packed with the density of earth that had settled for decades. The voices had recited 47 names, death dates, and final words. The hands had withdrawn. The faces had disappeared back into earth that showed no sign of disturbance. Sunrise came at 6:47 a.m. Cemetery maintenance arrived at 7:15 a.m. and found the grave filled, perfectly level, as if it had never been dug. Coates's truck sat on the maintenance road, empty, driver's door open. The laptop containing the camera feeds sat on the passenger seat, still recording. Coates himself was found at the cemetery office, having walked there in the dark, sitting in the parking lot with his resignation letter already written. His deposition included coordinates for 17 graves in Section 7 specific plots, where he'd noticed the refilling phenomenon was most pronounced. Cemetery administration initially dismissed this information, but county officials ordered ground-penetrating radar surveys as part of their investigation into Coates's claims. The radar results confirmed what Coates had suspected. All 17 graves contained additional remains, bodies buried beneath the recorded interments, outside official cemetery records. The radar showed stacked burial layers, some graves containing 3 or 4 separate sets of remains at different depths. The deepest remains showed evidence of movement, soil displacement patterns indicating the bodies had shifted position recently, within the last several weeks. Further excavation was deemed too dangerous and legally complicated. The graves remain sealed. Section 7 remains open. For burials, though families with pre-purchased plots have been quietly offered relocations to other sections, which most have accepted. Only 3 graves in Section 7 have been used since October 31st. Coates's camera footage remains in county evidence storage. The audio of voices reciting names, death dates, and final words has been analyzed by forensic specialists who confirmed it represents at least 30 distinct vocal patterns, speaking in impossible synchronization. Several of the names match cemetery records. Several do not appear in any database. The faces captured on camera have never been identified. The hands show no match to any remains exhumed from Section 7 during the limited investigation that followed Coates's resignation. Ground-penetrating radar continues to detect movement in the 17 identified graves, particularly during the overnight hours, particularly on nights when new graves are dug in Section 7. The earth there still helps. The dead still count.